So great. Hi, welcome to another session of the Tuesday Pulse AI. I'm Chuck Boyce with CB Creative, and we're going to continue the conversation I started last week. It was all about people and readiness, and this is more about, last week it was about why it's important to have a person responsible, and this is more about what that person does and why human reviews and how it fits into a small SMB or any business really, and the importance of that position and why it exists and what they do. So let me just go to the next screen here. So this is another B track, and if you followed this, I do an A track, which is more about applications that you should be aware of, and the B tracks are more on a business side of things. And so this is a practical look at output quality and human review, especially in the world of SMBs. And this could be anywhere from 1 to 2 person to 30 to 50 person, but in that smaller range. So AI, if you're not familiar, it doesn't know when it's wrong. And that's not a bug. It's really just how it works. It doesn't mean the review step is optional. It's just that understanding this helps build a more resilient workflow for your team. So here's the pattern that most people see when a new product rolls in. So normally somebody hears about it and they try it and they see a review, and so a tool gets introduced. The new tool gets adopted and outputs start to flow. The team start using it. They might use it for email or marketing or creating images, whatever, but output starts coming out. And where things fall apart is there's no review process. Nobody sets one up because the outputs looked fine. I put something in, I got something out, it looks really good, but then something goes wrong. How did this get out the door? And so this is a session about building a habit before that conversation of how did this get out the door happens. What this is going to cover in 5 points is why AI outputs fail in ways that are hard to catch. And that goes into the idea of how generative AI has been designed. It's a pattern matcher. It just predicts the next flow. It's not intelligent, even though it's called artificial intelligence, it just predicts really fast. So what a review process looks like for a small team, how to build the review habit before deployment and not after something breaks, what the AI point person owns at the output layer, the difference between reviewing everything and just reviewing the right things. And here we're going to go into these 5 things. They're all practical and they're all applicable to a small market or small to medium-sized business. And so the problem isn't that AI gets things wrong. The problem is that it does it confidently. And it's hard to catch because if you're familiar with AI, it can be a sycophant. And it just thinks that a cautious employee will hedge and they'll say, I think this looks right, but maybe you should double check it. And that's where it's useful. That's what tells you where to look. The AI tool will do the same thing, but it'll look identical. And the problem isn't that it gets it wrong again. It does it confidently. It just says that, wow, that is the best idea that you ever had. This is a great idea. Let's go for it. And that's where you come into these 3 failure modes to know. So they're confident errors. Imagine a team member ask AI to draft a proposal. And the output's clean, it's well structured, it's professionally written, it followed all your guidelines. But maybe one of the numbers in the proposal's wrong, or maybe a name is wrong. Not obviously, but plausibly. And that's a failure mode. Then there's the plausible drift. The drift is what shows up in most summarizations because depending on the context window and how much data that conversation can remember, it will drop things. And so if it's a really long document that you want summarized, it will read it really well, but it'll drop certain things like an exception clause. You're saying you want to review a contract, and maybe liability language or something that was in the main document that it's reviewing, but it drifted off because it can't remember everything, or what it remembers, it's already lost. And so there's also context blindness, and that's where it works with what you gave it, but it doesn't know that you updated policies last month for your business, but the person responsible for AI didn't update the AI model context file to understand this new policy change. It may be a new employee, it may be a pricing change, it may be a procedural change that you communicated, but the person who's managing your AI context and conversations didn't update. And so you get something that comes out, and again, it sounds very plausible for what was there last month and not what is current. And so confidence and errors are one of the biggest problems, because with a casual review, they pass. So it's extremely dangerous and it sounds very plausible. So why does this happen? Okay, so I mentioned before that it's a repeater. It just comes up with predicting what the next thing should be. And so you don't need to understand how AI works at a deep level, but it understands, it helps to understand what it really does. And again, it's predicting what text should come next. It's, unless you are explicitly telling it to look up the facts, they're just completing answers as fast as it can. And so that's why plausible sounds good, but it may be wrong. It's not lying, it's producing the most statistically reasonable continuation of what you started. And statistically reasonable is not the same as factually accurate. So pattern matching doesn't come with confidence that you can read from the outside. And so, again, it sounds really good, and the AI is only using what it's been trained on, whether it's historical training or the context you provided for that conversation. But if the context is wrong or the training's not there, it confidently makes things up because it's just matching the next pattern that it thinks should exist. So, with a small business, in larger organizations, they have multiple layers of bureaucracy, which is one of the reasons I got out of the organizations in the corporate world, is because there's multiple checkpoints before it reaches a client. You have review cycles, you have approvals, you have sign-offs. In a small business, say a 12-person business, the output can go directly from the tool to the email. So salesperson says, oh, I need to get this out quick. They write a quick AI, help me with this proposal. They put it out, instant email goes out to the client. No review, one person, one step, one send. It's not failure. The technology is working as it was sold, but the reality is that small teams have to fly. They have to do things, and that's exactly why adding this little review habit matters more, not less at scale. And so even if it's a small review, it is important. And this is one of the reasons that agents and people trusting agents to do a complete cycle without human in the loop can be a problem. So the ownership gap, for those who have not been following this series that I've been going on, I focus on what I call the 5 blind spots, and there's one of the blind spots, that's the ownership gap, and that's at the operating layer. Nobody owns the review step, so confident errors or plausible drift go straight through. If you have a point person in your structure, in your business organization, they may not have a lot of responsibilities other than, does this look good? Is it right? Is it accurate? It gives that, this is what I'm talking about, what that person actually does. So knowing how outputs fail is just one step. Step 2 is a review process that actually what that person is looking for. So what does this process look for? And it doesn't mean reading every word. It means knowing what to look for and where the outputs are most likely to go wrong. What it is and what it isn't is that most owners hear review process. They picture bureaucratic approval chains, sign-offs, audit forms. Process takes longer than it does to actually do the actual work manually. But that's not what this is. There's few different levels. There's lightweight, which is designed for small teams, no extra headcount. There could be specific, targeted at specific outputs and specific tactics that may cause problems, which may be something that's compliance related or legally related or financially related or customer related, but there are specific things that when a document goes out to a client or is made public on your website, your social media, that it should be validated if it has any financial, regulatory, or personal impact or reputational impact. It should be fast. It's built to move quickly. Just make it a habit. It's for a team of 10 to 20 people, a functional review process should be lightweight, specific, and fast. It's just, it creates a habit. And if it's built in before you start automating or adding AI, it just becomes part of the step, which is one thing that a lot of these businesses miss. And so there's two questions to ask. Before any AI output leaves the building or feeds a decision, question one, does this match the source? If AI is working from a brief, a document, a data set, it's summarizing, it's compiling, does the output reflect what the actual source is? Again, that goes back to the context it was fed. It's not whether it reads well, it's whether it's accurate to the input. And number two is, does this need a human judgment call? Again, many of these outputs that AI is doing right now are very low stakes. It's drafting an email to a warm prospect. It's reformatting an internal list. It's summarizing in latest news of the week or something. But if it touches something sensitive, as I mentioned, if it's financial, regulatory, human impact, reputational impact, a client proposal, financial summary, anything compliance, again, it needs a human review. And so if you take these two questions and apply them consistently, you create a standard. So does this match the source? Does it need a human judgment? Three outputs, starting from looking at high trust. High trust is formatting, basic drafting, internal summaries, outputs. You have clean inputs and low stakes. And so you're just spot checking for, does it, you don't have to review every single instance. Again, checking out your email and things like that. Then you have your medium trust, which is summarizing a client meeting or drafting a proposal, interpreting data. More review attention here, but the point person checks before it moves downstream. And then there's the low trust. Anything that's client facing, anything that has a financial value, your threshold you define. If there's compliance issues, are you meeting regulatory guidelines? Anything that has an potential to have an error where it has real consequences, whether it's financial or reputational or compliance, anything like that should have a human read. No exceptions. That is where your lowest trust is, that you need this human in the loop most. Categories don't need to be exhaustive, they just need to be agreed upon. And so you have to write these down. What needs to be reviewed? Is it high trust? Low review. Is it low trust? High review. What does written down mean? And so if your team can't find the review standard, it's not a standard, it's just an intention. And so one page, 3 columns, quite simple. It's what is the task, what is the level of trust, and who reviews it. What type of review? Is it internal summaries? It's high trust, it's a spot check, that type of thing. You just need a simple, standardized document in a place that your employees know about. They've been trained that these are the standards, they know where it is, and you get them in the habit of using that. So again, as in previous episodes that I've done, always talked about writing your policies, keeping your procedures, creating a shared document folder that everybody knows about, they've been trained on, and they use it consistently, because that is now your standard. It's built into your process, and it's not something that's tacked on. Think about it ahead of time. So How do you build this? How do you do this? The best time, it reminds me of that old Asian, could be Chinese, Japanese saying that says, when's the best time to plant a tree? Well, that was 20 years ago, but the second best time is now. And so the best time to build a review habit is before your team is dependent on the tool. The second best time is now. And so if you've already implemented, step back, start thinking about where things could possibly fail, put in the policy and start training people on that at this point. So should have been done from the start, but most people didn't realize it needed to be. And so start, if you don't have it, do it now. There's two different approaches. You either do it reactively, which is what most teams do because pressure to do things fast, get things out, make money, all that kind of stuff. That's where things go wrong because when a process gets added, it's kind of backwards. It's like, oh, something went wrong, we have to add this. But if you do it proactively, then by the time the process exists, the habit is already been established. And so if people are used to doing things straight through and there's no review process, that's the bad habit. So if you do a proactive approach, build the habit into the workflow before deployment, that means the review step is just part of how things are done. And it feels not like an extra layer, it's an extra step, but it's not something that you're reacting to. You already have it built into your process. So in a pre-deployment, here's what you need to do. There's 5 questions before you roll out any AI tool. And I could also add any automation tool if you're using Zapier or N8N or Make or something like that. That's automation that may have AI, but it's the same type of thing. Question 1 is, what task does the tool touch? Specificity, written, not specific enough. Is this done in writing? No. You have to say first draft client proposals under $10,000. That is specific. Number 2, what does a correct output look like? If you can't describe what the correct output looks like, you can't review one. And so write down 1 or 2, 3 examples before you roll the tool out. This will take you 20 minutes of time up front, but it could save you hours or many dollars later on. Question 3, who reviews before we move on? And this is where if most companies say, well, whoever wrote it, who's ever available, that is not specific. Again, you need to have somebody assigned with a name. They manage what AI is doing within or automation is doing within your business. It's not who's in the office. It's not who's ever available again. It's if it's not a specific individual, the process isn't real. Question 4 is, what is the escalation path if something goes wrong? It's not like if something goes wrong, it's when something goes wrong. And so 1 step, 1 person, it doesn't have to go to a committee, it doesn't need to go through a long review process. You have a point person assigned that is responsible for AI input and output. It should be very simple that anybody can know who that person is. And the last one is question 5, how do you know if the tool is drifting? And so all tools drift. And again, depending on which model you're using, it has different historical context, how much it can remember. And so if you're not updating the prompts and the context files that the AI is using, it can drift. And memory is part of this, but if you have somebody assigned to reviewing, quarterly checks doesn't need to happen long, but it should be consistently documented and scheduled. So in your first 30 days during deployment, these are going to be your highest risk because everybody's just learning the tool. You're putting in new processes, you're putting in new prompts, you're putting in new context files, and people are starting to get used to it. And so if at this point you add the review habit, it's not going to get skipped. And so do a weekly spot check, not a full audit. This is just a quality read. Pull 5 to 10 outputs before it gets put into production. Apply. Do you see what you're seeing? Does it look right? You're looking for patterns, not incidences, but how consistently is it reading either your prompt or your context file before you release this to public. And so within 30 days, you take 20 minutes, 3 questions: what's working? What needs the most correction? How do we fix it? Does anything need a trust level categories before adjusting it before we go forward? And so a debrief after that just tells your team, here's the review process, here's what we find, here's what needs to be changed, here's what we've updated. Again, training, communications, getting everybody, the humans in the loop before you trust AI completely, which you should never trust AI completely at this point. You may in the future, but right now you should not. So every output that needs to be corrected after it moves costs you time. And so it could be 2 times the cost of rework. If you put something out there that is wrong, how much is the rework? How much do you have to reconnect with that customer to apologize for the mistake? Or is it financial? Or is it regulatory? Is it a compliance issue where it made a mistake and now suddenly you could be liable for a state law that you weren't familiar with or something like that? And so every corrected output can cost time to move on. And so often much more than what the original task was. And then your 10 times client relationship cost, because if you are giving a client a bad output, they're not going to trust you. And are they going to want to continue to do business with you? And so just make the review habit a habit, a cost control mechanism, not just quality control, but if you understand how much a mistake can cost you, and you address that before a deployment, it's going to be cheaper than fixing it after something breaks. And so make it a habit. If your team uses AI or API-based tools, unreviewed output can scale quietly, because if it's just doing an API and you're relying, this is the whole idea of agents, is that it's completely reliant on the context and the prompting that you've given it. And so without a human review, these things can start to snowball, and quietly you don't realize it until somebody complains, until there is a legal issue, until you start losing money or your reputation, you lose clients. And so get in the habit and making that person's role concrete. So your AI point person owns the output layer. Oh, I think I skipped one here, sorry. Yeah. So human input impact, we build the point person around 4 functions. You have a named contact, what they're responsible for, what tools can be used, and what problems could be the things that they're looking for. And so if we left output review as a function without defining it, that's what this section is all about. Point person. 3 trust levels. They own the 1-page reference. When a new tool gets added or a new task type comes in, they update that. 30 minutes whenever something changes. Just make sure that your context and your documentation follows the changes to your business. The spot check cadence, weekly, bi-weekly, depending on how customer-centric, compliance-centric, regulatory-centric it is. You may have to do it weekly, you may have to do it bi-weekly, but again, these are the low trust things that you're checking, the spot check. And then when something goes wrong, when something is flagged, who gets to revise it, how does it get escalated, how does it get corrected, and who's responsible for the question? Because when you get into the regulatory world, you can't say it's the AI that did it, because somebody made those decisions and somebody has to be responsible. And so doing that check-in, doing the debriefs, making sure that things are kept up to date, that's what this point person does. And again, it doesn't have to be a full-time job. This is a couple of minutes here, a couple of hours a month. That's it. And the more impact on your business it has, the more input there is, the more responsibilities I have to deal with. For some reason, my slides are not changing right now. Let's try that one. There we go. So in a 12-person business, this is roughly 2 to 3 hours a week, or a month, depending on how compliant you need to be and how impactful it is. More in the first 30 days, but as you get consistent, it becomes habitual and it doesn't take as much time. And so they don't need to be the most technical. They just need to be detail oriented, consistent, and willing to push back or allowed to push back if something goes wrong or doesn't look right. So, if you're in a regulated environment, which anything that deals with things like medical or educational or hiring or HIPAA, FERPA, anything that deals with the Department of the FCC or any communications, anything like that. If it's regulated, spot checking is required. It's not just an artifact. So you should document that layer. When, what date it happened, what was the output, who was a reviewer, and what was the disposition. Was it approved? Was it revised, escalated? You don't have to overcomplicate this. These are just simple logs, but should it be in a compliance, in a regulated environment, if something does go wrong, the people reviewing it, the people in the regulation, the people who may be bringing a court cost up against you, they want logs, they want documentation. They don't, again, care that AI did it. It's who was responsible, who made that decision, how was it created. That needs to be documented. And this is really important in a regulated environment. So the goal isn't to review everything. That defeats the purpose because AI was created to make things go faster, make things more efficient. But the goal is to review the right output and finding out what the right things to review are. And so here we go. If AI was supposed to save time and we're reviewing everything, what's the point of using AI? And so that's probably one of the most common pushbacks is that AI was supposed to save time. And so wrong. That's not how you do it. Review is not the opposite of efficiency. It's the unreviewed output that causes the rework. It causes client issues, causes compliance exposure. That's the opposite of efficiency. You may have got the answer really quick, but if you didn't review the right thing, then it becomes who's responsible, how do we rework it, what's the cost of redoing this, what's our reputational cost. There's so many issues that could be wrong depending on your environment. Again, you don't have to do this with everything. If it's an email, if it's a social media post, if it's something that's not impacting your business, it's only those things that you're making a business decision and it's impacting your company. That's what you need to review. So, starting at the bottom, your low stakes, spot check cadence. Not everything line by line. Teams build confidence. The tool proves consistent. The habits are there, the reviews, it becomes less of an issue. It's part of your process. The medium stakes, that defines the two questions. What was it? Who applied it? It's applied when whoever ran that task. But then when you get to high stakes, you need that named reviewer, the full output, before it leaves a building, before it impacts a client, before it impacts anything. Those are the high stakes. Those, something needs to be done. And depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it and what your processes are, it becomes easier. But the first 30, 60 days tend to be where you're refining all of these things and how you're fitting it into your business. And that's where you have to start building these habits. And so this is the reframe that most owners haven't considered. It builds the confidence within your team because a visible review process builds confidence, and not just for your clients, but for your team. If the team see a review process, it uses the AI more confidently. It uses the tools that you specify that they're able to use. If somebody says the company decided that they're going to use Claude, but an employee decides that they want to use their own version of ChatGPT because they like the output better. Without a review process, you don't know what tools are being used, and that's the shadow AI thing. Just adds more overview. And so teams without a review process, they either over-rely on the outputs and stop checking, or they don't trust the tools and avoid them completely. And so if you have a review process, it's not a break. It just makes it safe for employees and customers and your business in general. So, the review habit closes all of the 5 blind spots that I've talked about over and over in these last few sessions. Is that the ownership gap is where in the past, most people haven't assigned an owner, and so it's closed with that 2-question standard. We have a named reviewer. The process illusion is addressed by different trust level categories. In the process illusion, it's you don't have everything fully documented or things aren't specified by different levels of trust. With the data mirage, if you don't trust the data that's being used to build your output, then you have to spot check the cadence when it shows up in the outputs. And so if you don't trust your input, you can't trust your output. The fine print is addressed in the compliance log. This is where if you're dealing with any regulatory issues, and again, you have to remember when you're dealing with AI and automation in your business, it's not where your business is based, it's where your client exists. Each state may have its own consumer protection laws. And so if you're in South Carolina, where I am, and I'm dealing with a client in California, then I have to be aware of California laws that may be impacted by whatever I'm giving them. And so that's the fine print. You have to understand where your client is, not where you're based. And then there's that hidden price tag. And the hidden price tag is where all that rework comes in. It's those extra costs that not only is it the subscription cost, but it's the training cost and the building cost and the rollout cost. But the real big cost could be after rework if something goes wrong. And so operational readiness looks like at the people there, you have ownership. They know what your processes are. They understand where the data is coming from. They understand the risks, and they know what the cost of failure is. So, as a close, here's your to-do this week. Write down your trust levels. 3 levels, 1 page, rough draft is fine. While you're rolling this out, it'll be refined. Just like with AI, you iterate, you improve the prompt, you do things, you refine and make things better. Bring in your point person, assign the point person. Give them that standard training question. Give them access. Train everybody else, but name the point person, tell your team who that person is, and then just put it on a schedule. 30-day check, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, add it to a weekly meeting at the end of the month or the beginning of the month, and just make sure that whatever you're using in AI or automation, that it is part of a regular agenda of what's changed in our business. Do we have anything automated or AI related that can be impacted by any changes we made? Have they been applied? Have our documents been updated? It sounds like a lot, but it's really necessary to do. And so if you want to do something right now, there's a quick check.cbcreative.com. That is a quick 3-minute test to see how you fit into each of the blind spots. There's no pitch, there's no sales, there's no product recommendations. It's just like, where do you stand? And then if you want to go a little bit deeper into that, you can go to assessment.cbcreative.com, and that's a little more. It starts with 4 questions about what process are you wanting to update, and how does that fit in, and then it goes into the 5 blind spots. And so use the blind spots, continue to come to my sessions. I have these on YouTube. We will be covering those. And so again, the review habit is what makes AI safe to run faster. And so build in that review process from the start. It's part of the process and not a tack on and not an obstruction. And so on that, I'm going to stop sharing